Welcome to A Place for Film, the I Used to Know podcast. On this week's episode, we're talking about the October Nights series. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Andy Hunsucker.
And I'm Jason Thompson.
And on this week's episode, we've got Professor Joan Hawkins here to talk to us about the October Nights series, which is part of a class that she's teaching. This is going to be Wednesday nights in October at the cinema. Joan, thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
So this is an interesting series. I want to talk extensively about this, but it's sort of all like horror films, or at least suspenseful films.
Right.
So some really great titles in this list, and we'll talk about those here in a little bit. All right. Well, let's talk about the October Nights series. Now, this is attached to an academic class that you're doing, Joan.
Right.
And this is you're part of the CMCL, Department of Communication and Culture. And so just tell me about the class in general and how these films kind of fit into the themes of the class.
So the class it's a genre class, and it's called The History and Politics of the Horror Film. And so we take, for the most part, it's a pretty chronological survey of horror, looking at the ways in which horror really functions as a subversive genre. So precisely because it deals with monstrosity and the breaking of taboos, it can do a kind of social commentary that often more quote-unquote legitimate film can't. And so we start with the silent era. We started with a Lon Chaney film called The Unknown, which was made in 1927, which is just positively one of the creepiest movies ever made. Lon Chaney plays a man who is masquerading as an armless circus performer, and he falls in love with the very young Joan Crawford, who has a horror of being touched. And he's planning to marry her, and when he realizes that on their wedding night the gig would be up and she would realize that he actually had arms, he goes to a doctor to have his arms surgically removed. This is 1927.
Wow.
And when he comes back, now truly armless, unfortunately, he finds out that she's been miraculously cured by Malabar, the strong man of the circus, and he plots his revenge.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful film to start with because students come into the class often thinking that nothing interesting really happened in horror until quite a bit later. And this is a film that really disabuses them of that notion.
Throw them into the deep end.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds it.
It's a great film. And then we moved from there. We went to Carl Freund's film Mad Love, where Peter Lorre plays this man who's sexually obsessed with a woman. And it's a remake of an often made story called The Hands of Orlok, where a pianist's hands are crushed in an accident and a murderer's hands are grafted onto his body, and the hands have their own life. We did a double feature of Meet Me in St. Louis and George Romero's Night of the Living Dead to talk about family horrors. And we then did Val Lewton's I Walked with a Zombie. And last night we did The Blob from 1958.
Oh, nice.
So now we're ready.
I love the opening song.
God, it's so funny.
It's amazing.
And so now we're ready to move into our October Nights series, where things take a turn for the grimmer, I think.
It looks it. So let's just start out right at the beginning here. Wednesday, October 2nd, you're going to be playing Peeping Tom.
Yeah.
And this film is not just interesting as a film. It's also interesting both for the career of the director and for, sort of the horror genre in general. Maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, it was actually released in Britain about a year before Psycho. And the two films are often discussed together because both of them feature these sort of quiet, unassuming boy-next-door kinds of guys who turn out to be, psychosexually traumatized serial killers. And part of what's interesting about the pairing is that, of course, Psycho sort of rebooted Alfred Hitchcock's career and was a kind of phenomenal success. Peeping Tom did exactly the opposite thing for poor Michael Powell. If people remember, a couple years ago at the cinema, we showed the very beautiful Red Shoes, which was also done by Michael Powell. He did Black Narcissus.
Yeah.
He did The Lives and Loves of Colonel Blimp. He had a really established career as a major British art film director. Some of his films, like Black Narcissus, always pushed the envelope on kind of entering into sort of disturbing territory, but that seemed to be okay. And then he made this film, and after this film, the film had a very short shelf life in Britain, and after the film, he was not able to get bankrolled for another major project. And so people talk about this film as the film that really killed his career. And now, of course, it's considered a masterpiece.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people talk about it as if it sort of is almost like a precursor to the slasher film.
Yeah.
Which I always find interesting because I really enjoy that genre.
Yeah. So the film is about a young photographer who he works for the business and does just straight photography work, but he also makes movies on his own. And the films that he makes on his own are the ones that are the slasher type movies. So his camera, his tripod is outfitted with a stake or a spike. And at a crucial moment in the filming, always of women, he unfurls this spike and stabs them, while also sort of undoing this mirror attachment that he has, so that the woman has to actually watch herself being killed. And his project is to try to actually film fear. But it does follow a lot of the tropes we now associate with slasher films. There's the eye, the point of view shot from the killer.
Yep.
There's the woman as victim, of course. There's the anxiety. There's the killing is almost always attached to a certain eroticization of women. So there's this idea that, people who engage in a certain kind of sexuality are more at risk than other people. And it deals very much with the kind of past. You don't start out with the childhood past that you usually do in slasher films of the 70s. So you don't get like that historical shot. But we find out that what has driven him to become the way he is are all these experiments that were done on him as a child. It's a beautiful film, visually beautiful, but also in terms of its use of sound, it is one of the most interesting films of the 1950s, early 60s, I think, that along with the kind of memories that Mark, the photographer, has, and the the film footage, various kinds of film footage that we see in the film. There are also all of these recordings that he has kept of his father's experiments with him when he was a little boy. And so periodically throughout the film, you get these, sometimes they're motivated, sometimes they're not, these things that come up on the soundtrack that are either his father's voice whispering away or him crying as a child. It's really an amazing film, just haunting and wonderful.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it when I saw it a couple of years ago. So the next one here, again, is a late edition. I didn't hear about this till like last week. But Friday, October 5th and Saturday, October 5th. And I don't know if this is, I doubt this is part of the class, but it's sort of branded under October Nights. Argento's Dracula 3D.
Yeah, it's a new Argento film.
Yeah. Now, it's listed as 2013. Do you know, is it actually shot recently, or is it like...
No, it was actually shot really recently. And so we just, as far as I know, we just got it. I mean, I just heard about it too, so it's going to be it'll be an interesting treat for the class.
Yeah, this one looks really interesting. Rutger Hauer's in this as Van Helsing, and it's all in 3D, and it sounds amazing. I'm going to make it a point to get there. So we can't really talk too much about that one because, again, it just got sprung on us.
It just did get sprung on us. But the other film. That's the other Argento film that we're showing as part of October Nights that is definitely affiliated with the class of Suspiria from '76. And that also it's a really visually stunning film. I mean, Argento uses gels like nobody else. And this is a film it's set in a ballet school, which has been occupied by, witches. And so an American student goes to study at this ballet school and suddenly finds herself like creeping around dark spaces late at night, being pursued by these demonic forces, and it's quite wonderful.
Yeah, so that Suspiria is Wednesday, October 23rd at 7 p.m. I tried to watch this once. It creeped me out a little too much. I couldn't continue, and I meant to go back to it, but I never got past that point. But
it's really wonderful, and it's I guess we should warn people because it's when you read the description of it, it sounds very much like a thriller, because it's this sort of the premise is this sort of haunted house or demonic school, but it is very violent. I mean, it has scenes of very visceral, graphic violence. They are beautifully shot and highly aestheticized, taking us back to the theme of Reffen's visit. But people should know.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is also not a film to take children to.
Yes. Yes, I don't know. Maybe Nosferatu you could take children to, but maybe.
Yeah.
Still a little creepy. Let's just go to the next one. We skipped one here. Wednesday, October 16th at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
The Mask of Satan.
Yeah.
This one is also called Black Sunday in some circles.
Yeah.
And I cut a trailer for this series for John, and I watched about the first 20 minutes of this, and I realized all the good stuff that I wanted for the trailer was in the first 5 minutes. So I kind of stopped there. But it looks kind of amazing.
It is
and I'm really
amazing.
excited to take a look at it.
Yeah. It's another it was made in 1960 by Mario Bava, who's like the master of Gothic Italian horror, and starring Barbara Steele, who is she was like the scream queen of the 60s, but she has an amazing face and really the most amazing eyes, and which are always shot beautifully in these films. But it's, again, another kind of, it's a Gothic story. So a witch from the 16th century is burnt at the stake, tortured and burned at the stake, and then buried along with her lover. And some unwitting archaeologist comes and finds her coffin and resuscitates her.
It's always the way.
Always the way. And what happens then is that one of her, an ancestor, a new contemporary ancestor who knows nothing of this whole history, is suddenly the witch Asa sees her as the body into which she could go. And so there's this battle over saving the good version of Barbara Steele from the bad version of Barbara Steele. But it's, I think we're getting... It says here that we're getting a digital print, but if it's digital, it was taken from the 35 millimeter touring print that was done a few years ago. So the unfortunate thing is that it's dubbed. But the fortunate thing is that this is really stunning black and white photography and cinematography, and and this is one of the best versions of it. So if you like black and white, as I really do, this is a great, great, great movie to watch. Stunning.
Yeah, I mean, and just the opening scene, if you're not strapped in by the end of the opening scene, I don't even know what to say to you.
I know.
It's just one of those things.
It's true.
It's amazing.
It's true.
So the last film in the series here, Sunday, October 27th, the original, well, not the original because it was sort of a takeoff of, it's kind of stolen.
Yeah.
But the first, one of the early Dracula films, Nosferatu, 1922, the Fritz Lang. Sorry, Murnau. Murnau, not Lang. That's Sunday, October 27th at 6:30 p.m. So off the regular path there. So tell us about this one.
That is that actually, unless it's very young children, that's one that you maybe could bring the kids to because it's much more suspenseful. But again, working within the constraints of the time period, what Murnau did was just quite marvelous. I mean, the depiction of the vampire is great. He's got like these rat ears and these long claws, and in fact, a lot has been written because of the way the vampire is represented. A lot has been written about kind of anxieties that that the iconography was drawn from anti-Semitic iconography from Germany of this period. And so these kinds of tropes that we still unfortunately have with us of the Jew as vampire, the Jew as bloodsucker sort of a lot of it comes or is affiliated with this movie. But the notion is that Dracula is, once again, I mean, he's this haunted, ratty character, and he falls in love with this woman and who finds out that she reads in some book that if a pure woman voluntarily gives herself to him and keeps him there past the cock crow, that will do him in. And so it's this story of tremendous, sacrifice on the part of this woman who allows him to stay with her until the cock crows so that she can save her husband. And it's quite amazing. It's another one that is truly beautiful. It's a German expressionist film. So the shadows, the use of black and white, the chiaroscuro effects are really phenomenally beautiful. Very atmospheric, very lovely, just one of those things that if you love cinema, it's one of those films that everybody should have seen. Everybody who claims to love cinema should have seen.
Yeah, they did. Dennis James was here a couple years ago and did a version of that. He comes every year and does an organ music to a film. It wasn't last year, because last year he did Faust. The year, I think it was the year before that, he did Nosferatu. And this one's always interesting to me because it's essentially a Dracula story, but all the names are changed, and that was sort of their way to get around copyright in 1922.
Well, and Bram Stoker's widow went after them because it was an unauthorized version, and she was not at all pleased. So he had some difficulty.
Yeah. So, Jason, what are you most looking forward to in this series?
I have never seen The Mask of Satan, so
it's a gorgeous.
I'll have to check that one out. Everything else, well, obviously, other than our new Argento, but everything else is. I'd be excited to see how people react to Peeping Tom. That I've never seen it. That's certainly an interesting movie. Even in today's context, it still kind of creeps people out, as it should.
Yeah.
But Mask of Satan I've never seen, so I'm looking forward to seeing that one.
One of the things too that's just wonderful, and it's again a plug for the cinema, but we've been very lucky to have our screenings for the class at the cinema all this semester, and this October Nights is special because this is being open now to the general public for the month of October. But one of the things that is so marvelous about it is that to see these films on a big screen and to have the total immersive effect. And as I've told my students, I mean, it's true that many of the films we're watching for the class are available on DVD or available online, but I really feel somewhat like a little fascist myself, where I really want them to be in their seats and not to have control over the viewing experience, but to really have to kind of work through whatever discomfort they have, because I think a lot of us, we get used to the idea that we're beyond the visceral, affective nature of horror because we can manage it so well when we're at home.
Yep.
And there is something that happens when you can't pause it and get up and go get a beer or make some popcorn, but you have to sit through the whole thing. That is. I think is special. It's really different.
Yeah. The thing for me is always being in a dark room surrounded by strangers.
Yeah.
That's the other part of it. If it was all people that I knew very well, I don't know if it would have the same effect. But being surrounded by strangers and then this horrible thing is happening on screen and I don't know how it's affecting them, and it sort of builds the experience for me.
I know. And with the class, I mean, there's a kind of there's a culture that builds with the class. But I think even there, I mean, one of the things, it was interesting that one of the things that the students were asking about was what it would be like to be watching the films with other people, because we've gotten so used to watching them as a group. So I will be interested to see what their reactions are being there with strangers. Yeah. And strangers of a very, all different ages, which is also interesting.
Yeah.
And people react very differently to movies depending on the generation that they're from.
Definitely. All right. Do you have any other thoughts on the series you want to share before we head out?
Oh, just that this is a wonderful opportunity to see some classic horror films on the big screen in a wonderful setting. the colors of Peeping Tom and Suspiria both are phenomenal. And like I said, the black and white cinematography of Mask of Satan is just stunning. So if you have an opportunity to come out on Wednesday nights, this would be a
Yeah.
I would recommend it definitely. And it's October. It's our time, horror
Exactly.
people.
Yes, it is. All right. Well, Joan, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
It was
Thank
wonderful
you.
talking about all these films with you. And I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of these myself. I'm hoping Mask of Satan for sure, and I'm hoping I have time to catch Peeping Tom next week or this week, as the case may be. So thank you guys very much for watching and listening. My name is Andy.
And I'm Jason.
This has been, and always will be, A Place for Film. A Place for Film is recorded at WFIU Studios in Bloomington, Indiana.